Okay, so dear colleagues, I'm pleased to welcome you to this Rose Road webinar on the Western Balkans. Our speakers today will be Oliver Várhelyi. Üdvözöllek Oliver, magyarul is. I just salute him in Hungarian because he's my comrade from Hungary, fellow Hungarian. Of course, he is the European Union Commissioner for Neighborhood and Enlargement. And James Apaturai, NATO Deputy Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs and Security Policy. Hello, James. And I'm very pleased that both of you could find some time to join us here and give us some insights about these issues. We also have with us Philip Brandt, Swiss ambassador to Belgium and head of the mission of Switzerland to NATO, who will present introductory remarks. The Swiss government is a long-running supporter of our partnership programs. They generously support our flagship Rose Road seminars, which assist partners in their democratic transitions, reform processes, and Euro-Atlantic aspirations. I thank the Swiss government for its commitment and hope we can hold Rose Road seminars in person in 2021. Dear colleagues, the Western Balkans are key priority for me as a president and for the alliance as well as the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Because the region's security, stability and future is inextricably linked with ours. 2020 is already a year of important milestones for the region. In March, the Republic of North Macedonia became NATO's 30th member. EU ministers for European affairs also gave their political agreement to the opening of EU accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. I'm hopeful the negotiation framework can be signed off at the General Affairs Council next week. Sustained engagement by the United States and the European Union were also instrumental in revitalizing dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina in July. We saw the early impact in the agreement signed in Washington in September, encouraging further economic normalization between the two. Of course, all is not perfect, and the COVID-19 crisis has added to a list of existing challenges, as detailed in the excellent report by our colleagues Jean-Charles Larsener for the Defense and Security Committee. Entrenched ethnic and religious division continue to fuel tensions. More must also be done to address endemic corruption, weakening democratic institutions, economic stagnation, and illicit trafficking. And external actors such as China and Russia are exploiting the region in pursuit of their broader anti-Western political agendas. It's clear the people in the Western Balkans look to the Euro-Atlantic institutions for their future. Those who have not yet joined the EU are all pursuing membership. And all are either NATO members or NATO aspirants, with the exception of Serbia, which remains a strong partner of NATO, however, despite its desire to retain military neutrality. It is equally clear that it is on our interest, in the common interest of NATO and EU, to anchor the Western Balkans firmly into our Euro-Atlantic community of nations and helping bring about lasting stability and prosperity across the region. So let us now take a stock of where we are now and where we need to go. I'm looking forward to the discussion. And now I'm asking if I'm right that perhaps Oliver should start, Mr. Commissioner should start because he has to leave at 4 o'clock. So if I'm right, he's the first one and not the ambassador. Ruxandra, if I'm right, if I have the...
I hate to contradict the president. I think the ambassador will still speak first and then we'll go to the commissioner, but he does indeed need to leave at 4 o'clock, so we'll take questions to him first. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, it was a misunderstanding on my side. So sorry, Mr. Ambassador. Then I would like to give you the floor as it was planned. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, let me start by thanking you as the President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly for your kind invitation to share a word of welcome with the participants of today's Rose Road discussion on the Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkans. Your efforts in enhancing the cooperation between the parliaments of NATO member and partner states, and especially your engagements in favor of parliamentary oversight and the democratic control of armed forces, are commendable and much appreciated. Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, Switzerland has always actively supported the Rose-Roth programme as a unique platform of dialogue for enhancing the cooperation between the parliaments of NATO member and partner states, as well as for the promotion of our common democratic values. To translate our support in a concrete manner, Switzerland established in 2000 the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governments, called DCAF, which from the very beginning has supported the Rose-Roth programme continuously. Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, we continue to face increasing and ever-changing challenges to our shared security. The relationship of NATO allies and other Western states with Russia continue to deteriorate. The arms control architecture is further eroding. The end of the INF Treaty and the potential withdrawal of a key partner from the Open Skies Treaty are just the latest example. Vile acts of terrorism keep challenging our free and open societies. New disruptive technologies pose complex challenges for our interconnected world. Our youth takes to the streets to remind us of the manifold consequences of climate change. COVID-19 has fundamentally changed our way of life and work and will continue to test our resilience. Just as my own country, the Western Balkans have been affected by all these developments. Recognizing the importance of stability and cooperation is in this important region, Switzerland supports furthering the integration of the states of the Western Balkans towards the European Atlantic structures, in line with their democratically expressed sovereign choices. Progress in integration constitutes an important step for the entire region towards its own aspiration for security, stability, and prosperity. Let me share three important considerations in this regard. First, we must continue to encourage dialogue between governments, but also among societies. Second, we must be working together to boost conditions that allow for the security in the region to improve and become more stable and less fragile. In the meantime, the international military presence of KFOR under the UN mandate remains a necessity. Switzerland has been part of KFOR since its beginning in 1999 and has recently decided to maintain its commitment until the end of 2023 and to increase its contingent in Kosovo. Switzerland also had the privilege to second the position of commander of KFOR during the past year. Third, other security-related issues emanating from the Western Balkans have a clear impact on our shared security. Such issues include uncontrolled migration, small arms and light weapons trafficking, and among others, corruption. Finding common approaches is essential to address these challenges. Mr. Chair, to achieve our common goal of security and stability, a common understanding of priorities is required. I hope that today's exchange of views will help us to get closer to this shared understanding so we may enhance cooperation with and for the Western Balkans in a meaningful way. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Philip. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Várhelyi. Oliver, parancsolj.
Köszönöm szépen, elnök úr. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much for having invited me to this discussion. This is a crucial moment in the we're making progress during the last year, but still we have quite a bit to do. The Euro-Atlantic cooperation has always been an important axle in the Western Balkans. Next month, we commemorate the 25th anniversary since the signature of the Dayton peace agreement. which have put an end to the deadliest war after the Second World War. This agreement was a joint effort of the international community and a milestone in EU transatlantic cooperation in the Western Balkans. But before focusing on our joint work and challenges ahead, let me give you a short outline on where we are in our relationship with the Western Balkans. As you may know, for this Commission, the Western Balkan is a priority, and we have managed to convince also our leaders, the European Council, to make it a new priority yet again, something you may have seen in March emerging from the European Council. We share the same history, the same destiny, and it is in our strategic and security interest to bring the region into the EU. The future of the Western Balkans is a geostrategic question, and we address it as one. With this in mind, we have put the Western Balkans and the enlargement process at the forefront of the work of this Commission. First, we have re-established a credible EU perspective for the Western Balkans by revising the enlargement methodology, which helped us to overcome the deadlock in the Council on opening accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia. The revised methodology makes the enlargement process more credible, more predictable, more dynamic, and stronger political steer. Secondly, we have proposed negotiating frameworks for Albania and North Macedonia, something which is presently discussed in the Council, and we do hope that in the coming days we will have agreement on that as well. Third, to complete the strategic framework for the next years and also to underpin our commitment, we have proposed an economic and investment plan last month for the whole region. The plan was presented in exceptional circumstances. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted all our lives in an absolutely unprecedented way. IMF projections suggest that the economies of the Western Balkans are contracting severely. This is a major blow to a region where already before the crisis, the GDP average was well below 50% of the EU average. It is therefore essential to support the longer-term socio-economic recovery of the region and the economic convergence with it, because we are convinced that most of the challenges are rooted deeply in that big difference between the economic development of the Western Balkans and the European Union. The economic investment plan, therefore, aims to provide up to 9 billion euros in grants, and it is going to be complemented with the new Western Balkans Guarantee Facility, which is supposed to raise at least 20 billion euros of guarantee financing. This support promotes sustained economic growth, implementation of reforms required to move forward in the EU path, and will bring the Western Balkans closer to the EU single market. By our conservative calculations, these investments leveraged should raise at least by 3.6% of the GDP of the region. The investment package is structured around flagship projects in transport, energy, environment, digital.
We seem to be having a technical issue with the connection with the Commissioner. So let's see if it resolves itself. If not, if I could ask the Commissioner staff to try to refresh perhaps the computer that they are using, refresh the page on the computer. That usually does help solve some issues. And so when the page has been refreshed, if the commissioner or his staff could request the floor again, then we'll bring him back up. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Very good. So I don't know where you lost me.
I suppose the facility for guarantee financing around there. So that's
Around there. Oh.
Yeah. That the financial assistance of the EU was going to help increase the GDP of countries in the region by 3.6%, if I'm not mistaken, if I follow this right. So around there, around the 3.6%.
Yes, okay. So the investment package is structured around flagship projects in transport, energy, environment, digital economy, private sector and human capital development, with a very particular emphasis on youth. The plan has a strong focus on improving connectivity when it comes to investing in transport and energy links, both in the region and with the EU. We want to reduce travel times, increase transport safety, build trade routes, improve air quality, ensure supply of electricity or gas where and when people need it. This is essential to stimulate economic growth and integration. The economic and investment plan has also a strong regional focus. I'm really glad that this objective is also shared by the leaders of the region, who this week at the Sofia summit agreed on an ambitious action plan to develop a common regional market. This is essential to increase the competitiveness of the region and turn it into an attractive investment hub, interesting also for global investors that are looking to reduce the distance to EU markets and cutting shorter their value chains. The common regional market is also a stepping stone to bring the whole region closer to the EU single market. Now, let's turn to the current security challenges. And I will also give you a couple of words on EU-NATO cooperation in the Western Balkans. It is needless to say that improving security and peace in the Western Balkans is another priority objective for a stronger EU engagement. The EU enlargement process has a clear security dimension with a strong focus on better law enforcement and robust track records on fighting organized crime, terrorism, and money laundering. Extensive cooperation on border security and migration is already ongoing, and our EU and Justice and Home Affairs agencies have become indispensable partners in this respect. Finding a sustainable solution for the global migration crisis is also in the interest of the Western Balkan region. We have always followed a cooperative approach in partnership with the region, as well as with international organizations and also with other multilateral partners. The new Pact on Migration and Asylum adopted in September continues, consolidates, and reinforces this approach. It aims a step change, however, in our engagement with the partners. And this new approach is centered around the proper protection of external borders and providing access to the territory only to those who are eligible for asylum, and cracking down on the abuse of the system and cracking down on organized crime groups associated with these abuses. It is for that reason that we are offering tailor-made partnerships for each and every single partner in the Western Balkans to address this issue. The COVID-19 crisis has, however, speeded up the security challenges around the world and exposed the vulnerabilities of our societies and infrastructure to cyber attacks, cyber crime, and hybrid threats. disinformation and misinformation around the COVID has also been booming in the recent months, and the Western Balkans have not been spared by these phenomena. So responding to these threats demands a robust, comprehensive and joint response. Closer EU and NATO cooperation in these fields would be of significant benefit to increase the Western Balkans partners' resilience. At the same time, the existing levels of cooperation between the EU and the NATO have progressed. And when possible, we think that the EU and NATO should coordinate messages towards the region even more, as was notably the case for preparing North Macedonia to join NATO, or in the context of the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. We maintain the military operation EU4 at ATEA in Bosnia and Herzegovina under the Berlin Plus arrangements with NATO and with the UN executive mandate to support the authorities in ensuring a safe and secure environment. Several Western Balkan partners actively participate in EU missions and operations, and we always welcome them. Both organizations also cooperate on de-conflicting and coordinating capacity building activities. In December 2018, the EU contributed 2 million euros to the NATO Building Integrity Program, which promotes good governance, transparency, and accountability in the defense sector, notably in Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. The accession process of the EU and NATO follow their own separate paths and criteria, of course. However, the EU and NATO converge towards the same goal of fostering lasting peace, stability, security, and prosperity in the Western Balkans. We therefore hope that through continued cooperation, our common agenda will bear fruit and give a new impetus to this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. And now I would like to ask James Apaturai to take the floor. Please.
So thank you from my part for this invitation. I've spoken to this group many times over the years, and it's always a pleasure. It's a really important group for us for you to understand what we're doing at the headquarters, to support it, for us to hear from you and what the concerns are from your countries. So we're really, I'm very grateful to have this opportunity more than once to engage with you. So let me turn to the subject at hand. And frankly, the Commissioner did such a good job of giving an overview of what's going on in the region, and the Ambassador also listed some of the challenges that I found myself sort of scratching out some of my notes, and I think the questions and answers are probably the most useful. So I won't speak too long. Let me start by saying how jealous I am that the Commissioner can talk about 20 billion euros as a potential budget in the region. That would be the NATO budget for a decade. I mean, the entire NATO budget for a decade, not in the region. So, you know, we operate with different resources, but exactly as the Commissioner said, very much towards the same goals, often in cooperation, and I think 100% based on the same analysis. So this is actually one of the most substantial, if not the most substantial areas of cooperation between NATO and the European Union, and I'll just touch on that in a moment. But first, let me say, this is a priority for NATO too, so much so that at the upcoming ministerial meeting that'll take place in just a couple of weeks, we will have the Western Balkans prominently on the agenda, along with many of the other challenges that you can imagine. So on the first day, ministers will be exchanging views on the Western Balkans, and we have all kinds of ideas of ways that we might enhance NATO's engagement there. And I think it's worth just taking 1 minute to, not even, to highlight why we consider it so much of a success to give a prospect of and then a reality to Euro-Atlantic integration. And that's really, I think, the flagship of our engagement with the region. One is it gives a direction for reform to countries that are aspiring to membership. Second, it gives us a platform to provide support. Third, the membership in NATO, and of course in the EU, but let me speak for NATO, locks in security, concrete physical security. And that's obviously extremely important, not just for security, but also for the investment climate. And that's my next point. We see a clear, direct, demonstrable correlation between membership in NATO, again, won't speak for the EU, but it's equally, if not more true, and an enhancement in foreign and direct investment. So the Republic of North Macedonia got a 100% increase in foreign and direct investment in the run-up to membership, and then the same again or something like that the year afterwards. And of course, you know, with EU membership, that's orders of magnitude larger, but it has a clear benefit. Also, it is a platform for neighboring states to address outstanding issues in a political platform. They are NATO members. They deal with these problems diplomatically. I think membership in NATO and the prospect of membership in NATO was really what helped drive the political progress in the Republic of North Macedonia, between the Republic of North Macedonia and Greece, between the Republic of North Macedonia and Bulgaria. I know that there are some outstanding issues as well that continue, including in the EU context, but this clearly has positive political benefits. And that's the reason, or one of the reasons, why the Allies are so committed to keeping the door open to countries in the Western Balkans. We've had some success in having countries walk through the door to NATO. It is obviously much less complex from a technical point of view to meet the NATO standards than it is for the EU, which has this big acquis. So I think sometimes we've gotten maybe a little bit faster down the NATO track, which I firmly believe only helps to prepare countries aspiring to EU membership as well, because many of the reforms are the same. The benefits of good neighborly relations accrue also in an EU context. So when it comes to our remaining engagement from a NATO point of view in the Western Balkans, it's focused in essence on three tracks. One is Bosnia and Herzegovina, one is Serbia, and one is Kosovo, and our mission there. And the ambassador mentioned that. When it comes to Bosnia and Herzegovina, they are an aspirant country. We welcome the fact that they're an aspirant country. It has been complicated, not on the NATO side, to be very honest, but on the side of Sarajevo and of Bosnia and Herzegovina more broadly. In 2018, we came to an agreement whereby we paved the way for Bosnia to submit its reform program. And it managed to do that in December of last year. But since then, we've seen continuing internal divisions in the presidency, which has made progress difficult on the road towards NATO. When we engage with Bosnia and Herzegovina, obviously the priority for us is reform. We offer programs when it comes to interoperability, to capacity building, to civil preparedness. We have an office there with a 30-strong advisory team. And we try to provide as much support as possible. We recognize that COVID has made things difficult in Bosnia. There was a clear progress in terms of a unified response to the challenge. Unfortunately, we see a little bit of that dissipating back into political difficulties, and that includes with regard to NATO and on the electoral laws. So it's not all clear sailing, but we remain ready to continue to support. With regard to Serbia, we fully respect Serbia's military neutrality, and we have a lot of cooperation with Serbia. The Individual Partnership Action Plan, that's our program of cooperation, was just renewed in 2019. We have a good political dialogue. We work on interoperability. We have programs to help them dispose of unsafe munitions, etc. But we also recognize, to be very open, that there is a complicated political dialogue about NATO in Serbia, with politicians speaking out against NATO. Sometimes the perfectly understandable desire for balance seems to be, to us, a little bit unbalanced, in that it doesn't reflect the actual level of cooperation and dialogue that we have. The public perception of NATO is very low, and we regret that. But anyway, we will continue our cooperation, and we recognize the important role that Serbia has in the country, in the region. On two quick points, or 3 quick points, and then I'll be done. One is on Kosovo. Just to say, we welcome the political progress that has been made in the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue. The EU has made progress, the US has made progress, and with them, and that's all very welcome. KFOR will stay there to backstop the process, and we look to our partners to lead on the political side. But the Commissioner mentioned NATO EU cooperation. This is probably the most solid area, as I mentioned. This is an area where we can meet on a formal basis, the 2 councils, and discuss what's going on in Bosnia and Herzegovina. More broadly, we use it as a platform to discuss the region and what we can do together. I fully agree with the initiatives that the areas where the Commissioner believes we can do more, including on messaging. I know, and he knows, that our political leadership at the very top really is committed and discusses regularly how they can do more together personally in the region, potentially traveling when it comes to messaging, but also directing their staffs to, that's us in the machine room, to find more and more areas where we can have concrete cooperation and mutually reinforcing programs. And again, as the Commissioner said, our people on the ground do ensure coherence, mutual reinforcement. We don't need to direct all of that from the top. They're very good at it, and it works. So I'm pretty comfortable, actually, with the way that that's going. Finally, let me just say in one sentence, I share the long list of challenges that many of my predecessors have listed, from COVID to the economic difficulties to pockets of radicalization, but also very much to the growing influence of Russia and in particular China in the region. And I think we're entering a period in all of our countries, but that's just as true in the Western Balkans, that we need to ensure that despite the fragility, the economic difficulties that our countries are having, that our companies are having, that we don't give away the crown jewels. In other words, that we protect the critical infrastructure, the critical technologies that our countries depend on, when there are others on the outside that might have deep pockets and offer what look like juicy deals to acquire them, but then leave us non-resilient, when COVID has made it blatantly clear that we need resilience. We need to be able to rely on ourselves, on our closest friends and partners and allies. And so we enter a delicate period where every country, my own country, and certainly the countries in the Western Balkans, need to look very, very carefully at who's coming around to buy their assets and their infrastructure. So that's something for all of us to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to ask for the first 3 questions to collect together. Ruxandra, who is the first, if I'm right, Mimi Kodeli from Albania. Yeah, Mimi, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me, guys? So good to see you. Well, I was listening very carefully to the Commissioner, and I have to thank you, Commissioner, and also the Ambassador for your very touchy words. You know, you're being serious in these issues, which are extremely important for persons like me as a person coming, I don't prefer to say from the Western Balkans. I feel a citizen of the world since the day I was born. It sounds tricky, but you know, it's important to say that. Well, I agree with what you said and your optimism. I need to be more optimistic than you are, but somehow I am less, for maybe obvious reasons. Roxana is laughing because she knows the way I discuss. Anyway, let's come to the point. Two little things. COVID was a tough proof for us. We were not prepared. We were not ready. No strategies. No nothing. We of course we are now learning by doing doing mistakes, and we are the same at the same boat with the same issues all around us. Means that we have to look deep in our future by using our potentials of today. Why I'm saying that? I have to return and say what Secretary Clinton used to say in the summit of Chicago, if I'm not wrong, NATO summit of Chicago, talking about open doors policies. NATO was strategically good enough, and the alliance and the membership of the alliance were strategically intelligent to look forward and to see in the future at that time that the future of the NATO was not just closing doors but opening them. 11 years ago, Albania became a NATO member state, and I assure you, Mr. Commissioner, that Albania had not 100% fulfilled what the NATO requirements used to be at that time. But strategically thinking, the allies, for not saying names, was prepared to receive a country like a small country like Albania with a very important position, and not only, and supporting Albania by having it within the family, rather than waiting for the Albania, having Albania on the doors, and knocking anytime we were talking about the reforms and all kind of other issues. This is one. I think that modestly, the same they did for Montenegro. Montenegro, it's 800,000 people. Nothing for the alliance, but very important as well. So Albania is good in being in any mission, NATO mission, EU mission. It's good in having safe borders, NATO borders. We are NATO border in our coast. But it's not good in passing during the pandemic the border from Albania to Italy, when you as Hungarians had no problems to pass the border. I'm saying Hungarians because I have two Hungarians in front of me, a place that I really love. So you find just one small reason to justify all the obstacles we are having in the borders. We are NATO borders, but on the other side, we're not good for some different issues. And as we are talking borders, Kosovo fulfilled all the requirements, and the visa system is still there. And there was no visa system where Kosovo were carrying a Yugoslavia passport. It's exactly the same people. Third, I will be always grateful to you EU guys for the 9 billion euros and the 20 billion euros to be raised, because it begins everything from economy, according to my modest opinion. And rightly James said, well, 20 billion euros, what a hell of money you are giving to this, to this, you know, you're sending somewhere. James, please don't forget that we are consumers of EU money, but we are also exporting security to you members, to us, and to support more security, because I'm exactly thinking like the way you're thinking. We have to improve security and peace and have a good economy. Based on that, we can provide with the reforms and the deepen of them. We have to robust trust. We still, even we within the EU, NATO, and the NATO member countries, we don't trust each other as much as we need to. So let us sit down and have a look on the way we can change information. We can robust trust and be more transparent to all of you, to your taxpayers' money, to your request, so we can have a more secure path on EU. Of course, as I'm talking as an Albanian, but of course I need to see all the rest of the so-called Western Balkans, member of NATO and part of the EU. Thank you for your patience, guys.
Thank you. And now the next question is Dragan Sormas. Dragan?
Hello to Roxandra, hello to all the panelists. Hello for you, President, my friend. Everything is okay. You heard me well? Okay, thank you. First, I want to tell something about, before the question, of course, I want to tell something about one issue that is not mentioned panelists don't mention that, but it was for us a very, very significant agreement. That's Belgrade-Pristina Economic Relations Agreement signed in Washington in 4th of September. This agreement has a multidimensional importance, not just for the economic development of the region, but also for building up trust between the two parties as a precondition for counting a political dialogue. The United States of America took the responsibility for implementation of this agreement. Key elements of the agreement are infrastructural projects for construction of Niš-Pristina highway. It's a very, very important highway. Then railway reconstruction in Kosovo and Metohija to establish connection with Serbia, and pan-European railway corridors, as well as investment in small and medium-sized undertakings, recognition of diplomas, opening Belgrade-Pristina airline, and development of rail and road traffic, which will contribute to increase the trade. Belgrade and Pristina undertake to respect freedom of religion, protect religious facilities, implement court decisions related to the Serbian Orthodox Church, and tackle the mission person issues. I think this is very important for KFOR mission today on Kosovo and Metohija, this part of agreement, because it's going to be a much easier to do the job on the ground. One of the most important provisions of the agreement for Serbia is that Pristina undertook the mini Schengen President Vučić initiative for establishing a regional single market that should be enable free movement of goods, persons, services, and capital. That is something that we in Serbia want before we all become members of EU, and that's EU in small, we can say something like that. Besides the significance it has for the economy and deployment, it would also facilitate traveling of the young and enable them to work towards breaking down the stereotypes and prejudices in the region characterized by nationalism. Creating the mini Schengen should speed up tackling up to bilateral issues as well as the all kind of cooperation. So far, the declaration of creating a joint market was signed by Serbia, not North Macedonia and Albania, but we expect something like that to do by Montenegro, Bosnia and Pristina. Yesterday, there was signed agreement with Albania and Serbia. We don't need any more passports when we travel between these two countries. Can you imagine that? Imagine that, for example. That's the significance of that mini Schengen agreement. The Republic of Serbia is strongly committed to EU membership. Up to date, so far, it has opened 80 negotiation chapters. Unfortunately, this year, so far, not a single negotiation chapter has been opened. We welcome announcement made by the Commissioner Varhey that the negotiation chapter 8 might be open in the forthcoming period. There is the necessary political will of the government to define the most important political issues from the EU accession process in the context of the widest possible social consensus, and the new government is going to focus its program on condition of an accelerated reforms process necessary to make progress towards the EU membership. On the end, we welcome adoption of the economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans adopted by the European Commission. We remain committed to Belgrade-Pristina dialogue facilitated by the European Union. And question for the Commissioner Varhey. What he would personally do in order to have more negotiation chapters open with all candidate countries, not only with Serbia, but especially regard to Serbia, because we are ready to open at least five chapters today at this very moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last in this round, Asim Saraljic. Asim, please.
Can you hear me? We have a distance. Here with me is our secretary, Željko Grubašić. He sent the best regards for you, Mr. President, especially for Ruxanda. Dear Mr. Verhelyi, dear Mr. Apertuari and Ambassador Brandt, greetings on behalf of the members of the Parliamentary Assembly delegation of Bosnia and Herzegovina in NATO Parliamentary Assembly on my behalf. My colleagues, Nikola Lavrinovic and Obran Petrovic, watching us because they are in their homes. You know, this situation with COVID-19 is especially bad in these days in Bosnia, especially here in Sarajevo. So here in our office is Željko, secretary, and me. I believe that the Rose Road webinar is coming at just the right time. Since almost a year now, we in Bosnia and Herzegovina have not been talking about Euro-Atlantic integration in a way that we are looking for good and logical solutions. There is no internal dialogue, and we go 15 years backwards when we seriously changed and adopted new legal solutions and become part of NATO's Partnership for Peace program. At this moment, we have nothing special to say in the terms of the Euro-Atlantic process and activities of BIH institutions. The topic of the webinar, Euro-Atlantic integration in the West Balkans, what next, is welcome, and we in the Parliamentary Assembly Bosnia and Herzegovina delegation to NATO are unanimous in our intention to further engage on the restart the internal dialogue on Bosnia and Herzegovina Euro-Atlantic path. I would also like to inform you that our citizens will vote this Sunday in the local elections on the 15th of November. But let me start with arguments and facts with which we are proud for a while, and then almost everything stopped. I will be open and ask you for your help, because it's not good that individuals who had held very responsible functions in the Council of Ministers of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina convince us that we are not part of the history and programs in the cooperation with NATO. Namely, a number of colleagues deny some of our recognizable achievements, and we have achieved a lot. They also question the signatures on agreements with NATO, which they signed on behalf of the institutions. Legal solutions, on the other hand, adopted during the very successful period of transition, they interpret in a way as if none of us were a part of those times and that process. It is a time to say very clearly that this is not working any longer and that things should be cleared up the way they happened. And it should be discussed with Bosnia and Herzegovina how to proceed further. We do not have enough of dialogue, and it's being avoided to talk about Euro-Atlantic integration with arguments. In the period 2005-2010, we lead in the Western Balkans region on many issues. According to the general assessment, we have adopted legal solutions that have made the security and defense sector very credible and recognizable. As I said, in 2006, we were already a member of the NATO Partnership for Peace community. In a period 2005-2017, we hosted 4 NATO Parliamentary Assembly Rose Road seminars in Sarajevo. We have guests from entire world and the NATO community. 12 visits from the NATO Parliamentary Assembly of members of committees and subcommittees, and 3 visits of NATO Secretary Generals are just some of the indicators how quick was our progress in the reform program and how quickly we were becoming the part of NATO's cooperation program on which an internal consensus was reached at that time. Serious problems appeared in the period 2008-2010, when the issue of military immovable properties should had to be resolved, since it became one of the preconditions for MAP activating. At the meeting of NATO Ministers for Foreign Affairs in Tallinn in 2010, MAP was assigned to Bosnia and Herzegovina conditionally. The condition was to register military properties to the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Instead, to consider it as a technical issue, it went to a political ground, and the forces and political opinions who declared themselves against BiH membership NATO used a period of 10 years to revitalize numerous and well-done things and even put it in question. By the great efforts and with the help of our friends, the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina adopted the adopted document, the Defense Review 2016. And after that, the reform program of BiH in 2019, by which is formally unblocked the cooperation process with the NATO. Namely, the Bosnia-Herzegovina reform program is the document adopted by a very painful compromise. This unlocked the process of activating MAP, as all countries called it, in the process of fulfilling the conditions for full NATO memberships. In a moment when all institutions are conducting a self-assessment of the implementation of the document of reform program, it has stopped again. New problem has been fabricated in order to stop the process of cooperation with NATO. The name of coordinating body of the Council of Ministers of Bosnia and Herzegovina for the cooperation with NATO is now being questioned, which clearly shows that progress of cooperation with NATO is trying to be stopped again. Mr. Milorad Dodik was brought up the theme of Bosnia and Herzegovina cooperation with NATO at the plenary session of one entity, National Assembly of Republika Srpska. The National Assembly of Republika Srpska declared the military neutrality in 2017. We need serious and coordinated turn, a very open internal dialogue, and return to the track that made us credible partner in cooperation with NATO. I repeat, on a membership of Bosnia and Herzegovina in NATO will decide its citizens. We are a parliamentary delegation, and in the very first day after the local elections, we are going to start again the process of internal dialogue on cooperation between Bosnia and Herzegovina and NATO and its Euro-Atlantic path. After the 66th annual session of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, we will call the most responsible representatives in the Council of Ministers of our country and the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and will discuss how to move forward. Certainly, all our friends from international community and NATO are welcome, and we invite you to help us. We will also invite representatives of academic community and NGO sector, and we launch again the dialogue on the subject, Euro-Atlantic integration and Bosnia and Herzegovina. What next? I didn't want to problematize the issue of migration and security problems posed by the migrant wave. The situation with COVID-19 pandemic is not good. We have a lot of problems, and that is an issue that plagues the whole world. I would like to inform you on certain problems that are current at the moment on our path to NATO. On behalf of the members of our delegation, I would like to thank our friends from NATO Parliamentary Assembly and the International Secretariat of the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, the Embassy of Hungary in Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially Ambassador Posha, which is the contact for cooperation with NATO, for its strong support. We also thank NATO headquarters in Sarajevo for their selfless and recognizable support in all our activities. We urge you once again to help us to relaunch internal dialogue on Euro-Atlantic integration. Now it comes to the moment when we ask ourselves, what next? And that is the subject of our today's seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now, Oliver Varhelyi, Mr. Commissioner, please.
Thank you very much. Well, I heard, I think, more comments than questions, but I try to respond. First to Mrs. Kodeli, this is something that we're working on, and of course, it came as a shock to everybody, the pandemia, and it was very difficult to convince our member states to keep the borders open. And this is still a challenge that we see in the middle of the pandemia. But there was one very important element that we have managed to convince the Western Balkan countries, but also our member states. And that was to export the Green Lanes initiative to the Western Balkans, and also to make it possible to use the Green Lanes between the Western Balkans and the European Union. Green lanes meaning that goods and services should be able to cross borders, even if because of the pandemic we have to close borders to limit the movement of the people. And there we have been successful. And what has been praised by Mr. Dragan Šormaz is actually the result, the mini Schengen initiative, or the regional economic area. It's because of the green lanes that we have been able to make that move. So I think that when you look at our handling of the pandemia, what you see is that we have had the closest involvement of the Western Balkans in initiatives that are fully reserved to our member states. We have no other neighboring region with whom we have had that such high level of involvement. Look at the joint procurement initiative for medical equipment, and that covers also the vaccines. Look at the financial support that we have been providing. Look at the medical equipment that we have delivered. And I think that shows our very strong commitment. On her comment related to why not the EU takes immediately these countries, well, I couldn't agree with that statement of yours, but we have to have also the member states agreeing to it. So when it comes to EU membership, as you know, the criteria is much more detailed than in the NATO. The level of engagement when it comes to policy design, when it comes to the legal system, is much more complex than in the case of the NATO. So it takes more time, but I do hope that you agree with me that we are speeding it up. And as a question also to as a response to Mr. Shorman's, how to open more chapters, basically how to speed up the process. We can speed up the process if we see that the reforms are also speeded up. So we need now an even bigger uptake and delivery in the process of taking over EU commitments and implementing them. And not only that, but with the new government in Serbia, I have really high hopes that we will switch to a next gear, because it seems that the new government is fully committed and devotes utmost efforts to two issues, apart from the COVID pandemic. The first is the dialogue. The second is EU membership. I take it as a very positive sign, and what I would like to relay back to you is that on our side, we are ready to speed up, but we need the government now to start to deliver. We have been waiting for the elections and then for the new government. Now everything is in place, so let's pick up work and deliver, and then we can also do the same on us. And finally, to Mr. Sarajlic, I do commend actually the work that has been done in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's not easy to make progress in that country, but I must admit that I praise all the efforts the presidency has made in the last 6 months by, first of all, agreeing on the 14 priorities as their own priorities. This was no easy job, but we have an agreement, and this is fundamental. Second, that they have already started to deliver on the 14 priorities, including the action plan the action plan on cooperation with NATO. We judge that to be a fundamental cornerstone also on the EU path. So I really encourage everybody in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I visited the country a couple of weeks ago, and I passed the same message. I really encourage to keep up the good work, even speed it up. Finally, we have local elections, not only in the usual parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in Mostar. This is a significant and major political achievement that needs praising. And on our side, we are ready to support the country to move ahead. And there is, although this is a public event, but there is a gentleman's offer on my side towards Bosnia and Herzegovina, something I've been discussing with the presidency. I'm ready to work for them. I'm ready to work and have Bosnia and Herzegovina to be a candidate country a year from now. But it means that they have to also speed up their work and engagement and deliver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to our two other guests, James and Mr. Ambassador Philip Brandt. If you would like to answer these questions, please just take the floor. James, or yeah, please, James.
Okay, let me just say a word, because I know the ambassador is interested in joining as well, and there's more questions to come. I think the only thing that relates to NATO was with regard to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Let me say just 3 quick points. One is, and here I want to echo the Commissioner, I have always, since I've been at NATO, admired the determination, vision, and courage of those who have been working within the country despite the structural and political obstacles to help move the reform process along and towards NATO, towards the EU. And I heard that determination again now. Eventually it pays off. So I can only say we're here to help support you. And I want to mention that I heard your call at the end for as much international support as possible to encourage reform, to encourage cooperation within the country. We'll continue to do that. We're trying to show flexibility, as you've seen recently, in terms of the way in which we engage with the country to minimize political complications and focus really on the practical elements. You'll be in a position to join politically when your politics allows for that, but we will certainly do our best to facilitate that. When it comes to COVID, we've seen how hard your country has been hit. You made a request to us to provide support through our Euro-Atlantic Disaster Relief Coordination Center. We did that more than once, and I think it's been distributed through the regions as well. So congratulations to those who assisted in that. And we'll be very open to continuing to provide support. I think that's really all I need to say on this subject.
Mr. Ambassador?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the previous speakers for their comments and questions. Switzerland will remain committed as well in the whole region. We have been committed now for a very long time. Switzerland and the region have very strong links, and starting by personal links with the emigration to Switzerland of many workers in the 60s from the ex-Yugoslavia already. And we are really committed to maintain our strong links and doing bilaterally our best, of course, to promote and boost security in the region through our bilateral development cooperation, for instance, but also through the participation to security operations. Like I mentioned KFOR, but we're also present in Bosnia in the EUFOR Altea mission. So these are examples of our commitment to the region. And I don't think I have much to add to what have been previously said by other speakers. But this is certainly something we keep in mind.
Thank you very much. And now we have another question. Yeah, Ivans Clementievs. Ivans, the floor is yours. Is there any problem? Have we lost him?
No, just a little bit of delay.
Okay.
So let's hope he comes on screen now. Yeah. There seems to be a bit of a delay. Okay. Henrik, maybe you can bring him back in the background, and then again, Ivans, if you could request the floor again. So let's try this again, see if it works. Seems to be an issue. No, we don't seem to be able to bring Ivans on screen. So Ivans, I don't know if you want to type in your question in the message box, or in the meantime, we have Mr. Sarajlic ask the floor again, if you want to.
I think, please. Because we are running out of time, so I think Asim could be the next.
Before you resolve these technical issues, can you hear me? Just once again, I wish to express our gratitude and thanks for Mr. Verhelyi, of course, and for everything what he has done. and especially thanks to Mr. Aperturai regarding all problems which we have here in Bosnia and concerning and understanding our political situation here. After Dayton Peace Accord, we passed 25 years and every step forward is a big headache. Every issue in Bosnia is a political issue, but of course we are on our path in Euro-Atlantic integration, and I hope with your help and your commitment, which express especially Mr. Verhelyi, that he will work for us, that mean a lot of us, that mean a lot for me personally, and I hope for all citizens in Bosnia-Herzegovina to go forward, especially in this pandemic, especially in this situation with migrant crisis here in the Balkans. So we hope and we think that we will go forward, but of course you must understand the constitution of Bosnia, our structure, state structure, so keep us in mind and help us on that path. Thank you very much, Ruxanda, Mr. President, and all contributors on this webinar.
Thank you very much. And now, do we have Ivans?
So, Mr. President, we don't have Ivans, but he wrote up his question in the chat box, if I can read it.
Yes, please. Yes.
He says, in the last month, the president of Kosovo, Hashim Thaçi, had to resign in the face of war crime charges. What can be the consequences for Kosovo in political instability in the region?
Yep. And now the answers. Who would like to start? James or Philip?
I'm sorry, I didn't. We had a technical problem and I was cut off, so I didn't hear the question.
So the question from Ivans Clementies was about the charges brought against President of Kosovo Hashim Thaçi and what that means for political stability in Kosovo and the region.
Oh, that's a difficult question. Of course, first of all, now the justice is on, and we have to leave it to the justice to deal with the issues that are being dealt in The Hague. We simply hope that, and again, as I said, we are committed to the stability and the security in the region. So we do hope that this will not be the trigger of a new factor of instability. And certainly we would work do everything we can to avoid more instability given this development. But I cannot say much more about that right now.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, the ambassador is quite right. This one's a bit sensitive and there are legal issues underway. What I can say is those of us who have been involved in this area, by which I mean geographic and otherwise, for many years, I think we've all seen comings and goings of political leaders, of political parties, legal issues. Many previous leaders, not just from Kosovo, but from the region, have faced sometimes convicted, sometimes acquitted justice. And that's not totally abnormal. I mean, this region has a history which makes that not unexpected. But what we've seen is actually quite a lot of stability in the political systems, that they haven't depended on just one person, that everything doesn't collapse when one person goes away, that dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade, it's had its ups and downs, but it's continued over many, many years, despite changes in leadership, particularly in Kosovo. So I think we can have some confidence in the political system there, that it can continue to do what it needs to do, even as personalities change and legal processes are pursued.
Thank you very much. Ruxana, do we have any other questions, requests? Okay, then now I would like to thanks to you all to be with us, and thank you very much for your time, and of course for our colleagues who were engaged with this webinar about the Western Balkans. I can promise that we can go on this path, and we will have much more discussion about these issues. So again, thank you very much for James Apaturai and Ambassador Philip Brandt, and of course the Commissioner Oliver Várhelyi to speak with us and share their views and ideas and opinion about this important issue. So no, I don't have any other role than to declare that this webinar is over, it's ended. So thank you very much again, and have a nice day. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.